Hello and welcome to our Week 50 video in our Through My Bible in 1 Year series here at St. John's. For last week's readings, I had asked you, as you finished up the book of Esther, to consider what details you might have found in the book of Esther that surprised you in some way. There are several that you may have picked out. You may have picked out just the general nature of the book, that Esther, a young Jewish girl, would agree to be in this strange beauty pageant of sorts and then be married to the king. I picked out just a couple of details of the book of Esther that I find somewhat surprising. And the first is that the enemy of the Jews in the book of Esther is Haman the Agagite. And by labeling him as the Agagite, we have a reference to the events of 1 Samuel 15, which took place 600 years before the time of Esther. When King Agag was captured by Saul, his life was spared by Saul, even when God meant for Saul to kill Agag, and it was the prophet Samuel himself who killed King Agag. If then this Haman is a descendant of King Agag, he's looking to carry out vengeance on the Jews for something that had been done 600 years ago by the prophet Samuel. Another thing that you may have found surprising is that Esther is no shrinking violet. She asks for Haman's 10 sons to be hanged, and they are, because she recognizes the threat that this Agagite family poses to her people. And so it's a sad fact of life in this sinful world that sometimes violence is met with violence, that only strength can prevent violence from occurring. And God raises up Queen Esther to her position to defend her people, and she does exactly that. Then as you move through the book of Revelation, I actually ask you to explain the vision of the 7 trumpets, which was a misstatement on my part because you haven't made the 7 trumpets yet. You read the 7 seals, and it's the 7 trumpets that you'll consider this time. But as you read up through Revelation chapter 7, you read about the 7 seals, and you see that God reveals these things for the sake of his people so that when they happen, they aren't discouraged. With God's permission, life on earth becomes progressively worse. People fight against each other. Inflation causes hunger. Disease and natural disasters cause death. All sorts of terrible things happening, and those terrible things can equate to things that we see happening in our own world. We won't know for sure until the end of time if this is the time that lines up with what God prophesies in Revelation, but we are warned such things must happen. As a word of comfort, the Lamb of God seals 144,000 for himself and ultimately rescues them. And that is not a literal number, 144,000, as if those will be the only people in heaven, but it is a symbolic number. 12 is the number of God's people, and 10 is the number of perfection, completion. And when those numbers 10 or 12 are multiplied, those are like underlying emphases. So you have 10 times 10 times 10 times 12 times 12. God is emphasizing this is the complete number of God's people. Not one will be missing. And by God's grace, we are included in that number. And then we get to look forward to what we'll be doing in heaven forever. In eternal gratitude, the saved worship God forever in heaven. Now, what we saw in the 7 seals is something that's going to be repeated again and again. And one of the best commentaries on the book of Revelation that I've ever heard is this. It's like watching the same football play over and over again, just from a different camera angle. We've watched this end of the world and final destruction of the world from the perspective of the 7 seals, and we'll be looking at it from a slightly different perspective next time, but it'll be the same series of events. As you move through and finish up the book of Nehemiah, you will also begin, besides also reading Malachi, you'll begin reading the book of Job. And as you read especially Job chapters 1 and 2, put yourself in Job's place. After everything that happens to him in chapters 1 and 2, if you were Job, what would make you most sad? And then, as you consider the vision of the seven trumpets in Revelation, how do the seven trumpets mirror the seven seals? And what new information do the seven trumpets convey? God's blessings to you on your readings, and we only have 2 videos to go after this. We'll see you for the next one.